get started. It's 2 minutes after 10. But thanks everyone for jumping on. We have this really great mastermind this morning on open houses. So this is being led by Kevin Hinton and Emily Phair of the Phair Hinton Group. So they are based out of both Chicago and Milwaukee. And so they're going to kind of give everybody the tips and tricks on open houses and how to hold like the slide says, the perfect open house. So you guys take it away.
Cool. Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for jumping on here and bearing with my technological challenges here. It won't be, I'll screw something else up, so bear with me. So anyways, what I would like to, before we get going, is who would like to chime in? Who has been doing some open houses, in the Milwaukee land area? And the reason why I ask is, obviously, the Phair Hinton Group, we're based out of Chicago and Milwaukee. We have a Chicago office, Milwaukee office, or Milwaukee team. And from the Chicago perspective, for the most part, open houses have been plugging along relatively normally, as normal as anything can be in 2020, with some limits to like total capacity. But who can give me a little bit of insight of somebody that's done some open houses in the past? And are you getting many attendees? Is it down? Is it the same? Somebody give me a little context that wants to chime in.
I'll chime in. John McLaren here from Keller Williams North Shore. I'm new. I started the end of this summer, but I've been doing 3 or 4 every weekend. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have context, pre my experience, but my experience is, I'm getting people at every open house.
Okay. So you're getting a handful of attendees for the most part. Mm-hmm. So it's not shut down. That's the point, right? Like as we're talking about this, if I wanted to get a little context, that if you said, listen, nobody's going to open houses right now, period. This is a 2021 conversation, but that doesn't sound to be the case. Just relatively normal attendance. People are wearing masks, all the kind of, normal things we're doing in Chicago. Is that fair to say, with probably attendance down a hair? Does that feel right?
I actually think attendance has been pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I tend to have open houses, honestly, probably around East Side area. I did a little one last week in Mequon, but it's been inconsistent in the sense that there's been a few that I thought would be very well attended that were not, and a couple that I thought would not be well attended at all that were great. So
perfect. Okay, well that's good. I just wanted to get a little like context in that, like I said. So let me kind of give the rundown and a brief synopsis of kind of Emily and I and our team and kind of how this came to be and why we care about open houses. So Emily Phair, my business partner, who runs our Milwaukee division, if you want to call it that, he has been in the business for 12 or 13 years, and I'm on the newer side in comparison. So about 5 years ago, I moved from New York to Chicago. I'm from Michigan, but moved from New York to Chicago and got into a new career. I was a golf pro. That's what I did from, say, age 22 to 37 or so. That was my career. And my brother owns a couple market centers with KW in the Virginia Beach area. And, I was trying to get back to the Midwest, and he always said, hey, listen, I think if you want to give real estate a shot, if you want to do something new, I think you'd be good at it. I think you'd like it. So, moved to a new city. I joined a team, what was called MKT Properties. At the time, Emily Phair was on the team as a buyer's agent. It was run by a guy named Joe Zimmerman, who's essentially our TL, our Director of Growth in our Chicago Lincoln Park office. So I joined that team and quickly realized that if I didn't find a way to grow my network and do some business soon, I was going to starve, right? So I thought, this real estate's kind of cool. You just kind of get your license and all of a sudden you start doing deals. And quickly I found out that that's not the case. You actually need clients, which came as a smidge of a shock. So really what I had to do, the point of why I became passionate about open houses is I didn't have much of a database. So I had my sister that lives here, who's been very much a kind of a core advocate. And I had a couple college friends, but for the most part, I probably knew 3 to 4 people in Chicago. So if I was going to kind of get business going and establish my career, I needed to get leads and grow my database. So the point of doing open houses was that to grow my database as quickly as possible. And the good thing about open houses is they're effectively free, right? So other than a little bit of prep work and, you know, some paper and some slides and things like that, it's a very, very low cost way to grow your database. So that sounded like something that I would be in line with. So that was where that was coming from. Had to get my database up and going, and get some deals going. So that was why I kind of became passionate about open houses. So the quick, you know, I'll kind of work you through this, but the reason why I gave you that is the kind of the style of how I developed doing open houses was based off the fact that I didn't know anything about real estate. I didn't grow up in Chicago, so I couldn't talk about the neighborhoods very effectively, or I couldn't say, hey, I sold X number of places last year, things like that, or I grew up in this neighborhood. So I had to come up with a different spiel, if you want to call it that, to establish myself as an expert and link on. So everything that I've done came from the fact that I didn't know a whole lot about Chicago, and I didn't have previous history, and I didn't have a huge network. So that's just a little bit of context. And throughout this, I'd like at any point somebody to chime in, ask questions. We'll take a couple breaks, but I'd like this to be as interactive as possible, as opposed to me just talking. So does anybody have kind of any questions before we get going, or should we rock and roll here? All right, we'll do it. Somebody have something to say?
This only is one. I have two of them. So I used it once. We did a big.
Okay. So we're all.
Hey guys, can you guys just mute yourselves if you're not
mute yourself,
talking?
kind of unmute yourself when you want to say something.
I'll see if I can mute people, Kev, but I say rock and roll.
Okay, let's go to it. Okay, so the first thing that kind of one of the philosophies in how we do open houses and things like that, or the first reality is open houses are very much just about getting sellers as they are getting buyers. That's a really important thing, and it's a misconception that a lot of agents, in my opinion, don't get quite right. It's very good to want to be a listing agent. There's way more leverage in listings. You get paid more. However, and so sometimes people don't do open houses because they say, hey, I don't really want to work with buyers. Well, you can make open houses just about, make it just about as much about getting sellers as it is buyers. So that's just kind of an important thing to know. One little story to kind of tell that gives a little bit of context is, you know, when you do one open house, if you do a good open house, or if you do open houses consistently, it can really spiral. There's a chain of transactions that can come out of just effectively doing one open house. So, you know, this would be my most successful story of kind of open house conversion and kind of what it led to is essentially I did one open house that led to about $5 million in sales by the chain reaction that it started. So to kind of not bore you with the details, but we had a listing in a condo at 2219 Levanzia. And, you know, we got that did an open house attendee came in, and we got that listing sold, which what that did is that then kind of motivated my clients to buy 2446 Moffett. Okay. We had not the person that won the offer at 2219 came in, didn't win the property, but was really interested in that building. So we did some circle prospecting, and we found that the neighbor at 2223 was selling. And so they bought that off market, right? That open house attendee had a place to sell. That was 1620 Oakley. So then we sold their place at 1620 Oakley. At 1620 Oakley, we met two different owners, one at 1670 Claremont and 2310 St. Paul, that both had to sell. And then they went on to buy a couple different purchases. So the point is that if you do one open house that is effective, you have no idea where it could go. And the reason why I say that is a lot of times people get, they don't do enough of them, right? They say, hey, I've done 3 open houses and nobody came in, or I'm not really converting these. I don't like open houses, right? Well, the point is that you're really only one good open house or one good attendee away from putting together a pretty big chain of deals if you do it right and you stay in touch with those people. So the point of that is twofold. One, open houses are very much a numbers game. You have to do a lot of them. You can't dabble at them, or they will likely be frustrating. And secondly, if you're not getting a lot of success in, you know, the first 5 or 6 open houses you do, just know how quickly it can spiral if you get the right person that kind of starts the right chain reaction. And
Hey,
then,
Kev,
yeah.
can you comment on what it means to have a lot of open houses?
Yeah.
Like how many?
Yeah, and I will get to those. I will get to those numbers shortly. So anyway, the point is, there were 6 or 7 transactions off of that one open house, but that doesn't stop there, right? You now have 6 or 7 clients that have a whole new network of referrals for you. So it's not just those 6 or 7 deals that came out of that one open house. It's all the referrals that came out of it that came from there. So to Emily's point, when I say doing a lot of open houses, right? It's not dabbling. What we know, what we've learned is that for everyone that walks into an open house, about 10% of the people that walk through that actually kind of sign in, that actually walk through that, for every 10 people that walk into an open house, we're going to do a deal. So basically there's a 10% conversion rate. That's probably a little bit higher than some people. We had to work into that. But that's about what our team converts at. So then it just kind of becomes a numbers game. So for example, if you thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do one open house, 2 out of every 3 weekends. So I'm give or take, I'm going to do 30 open houses over the course of the year. Okay. And then now this is an approximate, but say that there are 5 attendees on average that come into an open house. Okay. Now you've got 150 leads. If you convert at a pretty good rate, okay, that is 15 deals out of doing 30 open houses, which isn't very much, right? And then if you think of, okay, how long does an open house really take to kind of prep and do properly? If an average open house is an hour and a half to 2, which is what we do in Chicago, let's just kind of ballpark and round up that say each open house is about 3 hours worth of work. Half an hour prep work, half an hour shutdown. So in general, if you do a 2-hour open house, you probably got to block off about 3 hours. So of those 30 open houses, you've pretty much worked about 90 hours. Okay. Then if you do a little bit more math and you say, okay, I've done 15 sales. What's my average price point? I don't have the Milwaukee one in front of me, but I think in the North Shore office is give or take around 300K. That's about, we're about 400K in Chicago, but I think it's about 300K in your office. And then if the average commission is about $7,500. So for that 90 hours of work, you brought in about $112,000 worth of GCI. And then if you break that into hourly, that's like $1,250 an hour. So the point is, would you take a job where you made $1,250 an hour? And I certainly would. And that's what you kind of have to keep in mind when you're into open house 1 and open house 2 and open house 3, and you're like, oh, I'm not really getting leads, or I haven't converted, I haven't gotten a sale out of it. First of all, it's a numbers game. You have to do a lot of them. But when you start to break it down and you start to do some deals off of it, your hour for dollar return is quite good. So the point of that is be consistent, do a lot of them. And by the way, 30 open houses over the course of years isn't that many, right? You could do 30 weekends and do 2, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, and you do 60. And theoretically, you could double your business. So if you want to build your business quickly and build your database, I think it's one of the best and simplest ways to build your database. To build your business. And in my first year in real estate, as kind of was the lead up to this, I did about 20 sales from open houses in my first year, and then got probably 10 or 15 from my sphere or a combination of referrals off of those. So it can be a pretty good way to get going. That's the whole point of this. I think it's the best thing that a new agent can do. And do you have any thoughts to chime in on some of those numbers?
Yeah, I do actually. And we got a question from Thomas Borger. So one of the questions that he asked, and I think everybody who's new in the business and doesn't have listings would be wondering, like, how the heck do I do open houses if I don't have any listings? So I don't know if this is part of your presentation going forward, or if you want to just answer it now, but where did you find open houses when you were brand new?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, it was one of the benefits of being on a team. That was a good resource for me because I was on a relatively big team where we had lots of listings. So that helped. That can be a challenge for a solo agent. I don't know what it's like in the North Shore office, but I've met a lot of you and you're all super nice. That I think for the most part, in our office, if you are reaching out to agents and you get to know some of the agents, some of the bigger teams, they're going to be quite open to you hosting open houses. So I think if you start to put it out there and you make some strategic relationships with some of the bigger teams or some of the bigger agents, and they know you're reliable and things like that, open house opportunities will tend to show up for you. Would you agree with that, Em?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, I see this on our Facebook page, and keep doing it, but just post your availability. Or if you're a listing agent and you're on this call, if you post the listings that you have and ask for help, people will jump at it. So they are everywhere. If you throw it into the universe, you will get open houses, no problem.
Yeah, for sure. Because as a listing agent, right, all we really need you to do, by the way, we don't typically work off the philosophy that open houses sell listings. That's not really the point of it. We do it to get leads. But if you can prove to us that, hey, you're reliable, you show up, you follow up with feedback, you don't need a whole lot more than that to make a listing agent confident in your ability to host an open house. So it doesn't take much, and just kind of proactively reach out and get to know those people. So there are some things that you can do to drive traffic, or under the pretext of driving traffic, right? So when you're working with the seller and you say you're gonna host an open house, right? We talk about some of the things that we do to quote unquote drive traffic to the open house. Having said that, I don't really think that these things drive that much traffic to open houses. People are going to go to open houses or not, right? We are doing these things to potentially appease our sellers, that we are doing things to try to get traffic, but you're mainly doing these things to get more buyers and sellers. So when you do things like you do circle prospecting and you do door knocking, right? Those are things really, for the most part, to start to get listings, right? So if you're doing some circle prospecting and you hear people all the time, I hear people trying to circle prospect and they're almost getting it right, but they don't take the conversation far enough. So for example, I'll hear agents in my office that they say things like, they're calling a list of numbers, and they say, hey, listen, I've got an open house at 123 Main Street. Do you have anybody that you know that's looking to move into the area? And then they say, no, I don't know anybody, thanks. And then the agent hangs up, right? The point of that is you're trying to keep them on the phone long enough to say, well, how long have you been in the neighborhood? What are your plans? Do you need any help? So you're not really they probably don't have a friend that's looking to move in the neighborhood and then is going to send them to your open house that they weren't going to come otherwise. The point is to try to keep them on the phone, to have a real estate conversation with them, right? So that's the same thing when you door knock and you hang door hangers, things like that. Now, social media, you can absolutely, get both buyers and sellers off of that. We would write thank you notes and things like that. If we did a condo building, if it was a 8-unit condo building, we would typically write a thank you note to each one of the other owners, slide it under the door. Hey there, we're gonna be hosting an open house from 12 to 2. Hopefully we won't be bothering you, but if you want to pop down, check it out. Thanks for bearing with us while we get Rachel and Mike's home sold, things like that. So all those things that you're doing, you're kind of telling your seller that you're doing it to drive traffic to the open house, which it might, but you're doing it for your own benefit, to build your own business. And so you don't have to do all of these things leading into an open house, but it would be good to do one of them. So maybe zone in on one of them that you're comfortable with. Maybe you like to do circle prospect. Maybe you do a lot of social media leading into an open house. Maybe you do like to do some door hangers or some door knocking. To do them all is pretty cumbersome. But if you do one of those, you will absolutely get leads. And the point of it is you're going to get listings, right? And listings are hard to come by in Milwaukee. I know that. So if you can get listings out of these open houses, that is gold, right? That's what you want. So does anybody have any questions kind of on some of the things that you can do to drive traffic or anything that you've done that you...
Kev, can you go back to the last slide?
Yeah.
Because I think this is a good opportunity. If anybody has ideas or additional activities that they've done, I have some examples myself, but I'd love to hear if anybody else has something to share. How about Catherine Cronin? Tell us about the door knocking that we didn't actually knock at Grand Tosa.
Yeah, so we had a listing go live in Wauwatosa, right on Grand Tosa. So we just took the afternoon prior to our open house, and with COVID sensitivities, we just put flyers in people's door, kind of on the latch on their door, just to really get our name out there too. We haven't seen anything come from it yet, but that doesn't mean that it's not hanging on their refrigerator or unless Emily, of
Yeah,
something.
Catherine doesn't know this, but yesterday we did get a referral from our seller at Grand Tosa who connected us with his neighbor. So it did turn into something, as a matter of fact.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys can do that. You have to be a little bit COVID sensitive, obviously. That's one really easy, cheap thing that you can do just to get your name in front of people and connect with buyers and sellers. We do have another question. What is circle prospecting? So we sort of stepped over the basic definition of that. So I'll fill you guys in really quickly. Circle prospecting is basically taking a list of phone numbers typically around a property. So if you've got 123 Main Street, you might say, okay, I'm going to find phone numbers of the properties that are all within a half a mile or a mile, or pick your distance, and then call everybody around that property. And there's lots of different scripts. You can circle prospect before an open house, like we're talking about today. You can circle prospect a price reduction. That's another option. You can circle prospect, hey, we just sold this property and we need more like it. Are you thinking of selling? So it's just connecting with people around a specific property. So you're circling around a listing. And I know the follow-up question to that is going to be, where do we get the numbers? And so that's a whole separate conversation. We can talk offline, or if anybody wants to put it in the chat of where you guys find phone numbers so that you can actually do the circle prospecting. And then the follow-up question I just got is, cold calling still done? Oh yeah. Yeah, we do a lot of cold calling. I used to do it consistently, like literally every day, not as much anymore, but we do have an agent on our team right now who does a ton of cold calling. So it's definitely still done. If anybody wants to chime in and tell us what you're doing for cold calling, we'd be happy to hear other examples.
Perfect. Perfect. Anybody have any questions or comments or anything that they've been doing that has been driving some traffic or has been getting you listing or buyer leads besides just the people that walk in the door?
Hey, Kev, you mentioned thank you notes.
What's that?
You mentioned thank you notes.
Yeah.
And I want to just mention this. Open house boredom can be a thing, right? So if you go into an open house and nobody comes, or you think you might have very little traffic, certainly that's an issue that we're having right now in Chicago, less so in Milwaukee. But one thing about thank you notes, you guys, an open house is a 2-hour lead generation window. So you can do lead generation in so many different ways, but we used to on our team, we should probably get back to this, but we used to put together packets, just like a folder. You walk into an open house and in your folder, you have flyers for the property, you have a sign-in sheet, all that. But we also had thank you notes inside of our folder, and they were stamped envelopes, blank. And so if you're sitting there and you're like, oh gosh, nobody's here, it's snowing or it's raining and I'm bored, you can do some lead generation right then and there. So you want to think about open houses, and Kevin's going to get to this. You're not trying to sell the property. You're trying to book 2 hours of lead generation, hopefully from buyers coming into the property. But if not, then you can still control your activities while you're there and do some type of lead generation.
Yep, absolutely. Because it can get demoralizing. Like, oh, I did all these things. I went there. I was in there for 2 hours and nobody came, right? But if you went there and you're like, oh, I hammered out 15 handwritten notes, nobody came through. That's a positive thing. You're going to feel good about that. So for sure, you definitely want to bring a separate activity that you want to plan on doing during the open house in case it's light, and then you'll still feel that your time was productive. Cool. So I kind of want to talk through like the day of the open house, right? Like, what do you do to convert leads, right? Because like I said, you can only to a certain degree to control how many people actually come into the open house, right? There's a lot of factors that go in there. But for the people that do show up, right, we're trying to convert at a relatively high level. So these are some of the things that I've done to help to help my conversion rates on a given open house. So the first thing is, right, when you now everything's a little bit different, right? A single family home or whatever versus a condo and things like that, some with fences, but do everything you can do to make them call you. Don't let them ring the doorbell. don't have the door unlocked. Don't let them buzz the condo building, right? So what we're going to do is on our open house signs and on the front door, say for access, call Kevin at 516-353-0798, and then maybe a picture of the listing, right? Because that is your first chance to capture their phone number. So my phone, I'm literally doing open houses where I see somebody at the front door and I'm hiding in the drapes, making them to call me, right? Because I want to have their phone number. So my phone is littered with phone numbers like Bob, Main Street, Michelle, 10th Ave, things like that. Because what they do is they're going to call you and they say, hey, we're here for the open house. You're like, yeah, no kidding. I see you 3 people, but I'm not answering the door. And, you know, they call you and you say, hey, you know, and then, you know, we're here for the open. So great. I said, I'm Kevin. What's your name? And they say, oh, I'm Mike. Cool. Immediately before I go open the door, I'm saving that phone number. And now Mike Main Street is in my phone, right? So if they don't sign in, now I've immediately gotten their phone number. And it's kind of funny when you then call them a couple of days later, they're like, how'd you get my number? I didn't leave my number. You're like, well, you called me, remember? So it's you want to do that. So that's the first thing, right? Don't make it hard on them. Get their phone number, right? So now when I open a door, or when I go down the stairs, I open it, I always tend to ask the same generic question. I tend to say, hey guys, did you have this one planned, or were you just kind of walking by the neighborhood? I'm doing something to just kind of probe a little bit, because maybe, for example, they say, oh, we're the neighbors, we're thinking about selling in the spring and we just wanted to see the house. Like, that is gold when they say something like that. And people will say that. They might say things like, yep, you know, we had this one planned. Our agent sent us over to see this open house, right? I want to know if I've got 7 or 8 people in the house at the same time, I need to know who I'm focusing my attention on, right? Now, if somebody has an agent, I'm going to spend way less time on them. Now, I don't leave it at that when they say they have an agent, right? I immediately say, oh, cool, who's your agent? And I want to know if they're bluffing, right? So if they are bluffing, they might be like, I don't really know, what's her name, kind of thing. And so either one of 2 things, they don't actually have an agent, or their agent is doing such a poor job of staying in touch with them, then they're probably fair game, right? So you can get into the whole thing of whether or not they've signed exclusive agency agreements. You can dive into that later. But if somebody says their agent sent me, you know, I'm going to respect that, but I'm going to probe a little bit and kind of find out a little bit more. But the point is if I've got 2 people in there and, you know, both said they had agents and 2 others that did not, I'm going to focus my attention on building a rapport with the people that don't have agents. Does that make sense? So when they come into the house, right? This is my MO, right? What do I mean by try to be cool? So Emily sent it earlier, but in general, like, the last thing you're trying to do, and I say this facetiously, but not really, is you're not trying to sell the property. Okay. What I'm trying to do is build rapport with these people. So when this particular property may or may not be for them, that they want to work with me, right? That's what I'm doing here. And the first thing is when they walk in, right? I don't ask anybody to sign in right away. I don't do that. I give them lots of space. So probably what I'll say is, hey guys, come on in. You know, pretty straightforward, 3-bed, 2-bath. I got a bunch of information on the island. Make yourself at home, especially in COVID times. They don't need you stalking them and all up in their business. Make yourself at home and let me know if you have any questions, right? And then I kind of let them explore the house or explore the condo, right? I will circle back to them later, but I don't jam the sign-in sheet in front of them right away, because I find that if you do that right away, the rate of fake information that you get is way higher. I'm going to build rapport for a little bit, and then I'm going to add some value, and then I'll ask them to sign in. So that's just my particular strategy. This is not scientific by any means, but there's just ways to build rapport. So just be a normal human, right? Say, just be friendly and try to find a way to make a connection. So for example, the easiest thing that you can do is the area code, right? When your phone rings, you've made them call you. It might be from San Francisco. It might be from New York. It might be from a different part of Wisconsin, from Chicago. Chances are, wherever that zip code or area code comes in, you should be able to make some connection. Like, oh, you guys are from Madison. You know, I went to Wisconsin, or my sister lives in Madison, or something, right? I look at, like, sounds creepy, but I kind of stalk them up and down. Like, look at logos. Like, I played golf, like golf logos. If they're wearing something college, they've got a coffee, coffee from a coffee shop you like. You're like, oh, I love that. I love your shoes, whatever. Just kind of interact, right? And don't be salesy. Okay. So when you do that, then you start to build rapport, and then you've set this off as you're not a salesman. You're just kind of there and you're being helpful. So those are the types of things that I tend to do just to build a little bit of rapport, because I am going to try to get them as clients, but I'm not doing it right off the bat. Okay. So where I was going with this earlier is, don't actually try to sell the property, right? If they are very interested in the house or in the condo, whatever you're selling, it will become apparent. And at that point, you answer all their questions. And maybe they do buy it, right? But statistically, they're not, right? Statistically, that open house attendee is not the person that's going to buy it. So if you spend all your time, and in Chicago, right, I hear it all the time, right? People come in, you can tell they're kind of lukewarm on it. And the agent is just talking about, it's a two bed, they have great reserves, the building is sound, blah, blah, blah. They did all this, but this person's not really interested in this property. So that's just all noise, right? That's white noise. That is not of any value to that person, because this isn't the house that they're going to buy. They're just being polite and listening to you, right? So what you want to do is you want to do some things that kind of separate yourself as an expert, or that you want to educate them, I guess is what I'm saying here. So circling back to kind of how I started, right, is when I moved to Chicago, I certainly couldn't talk about neighborhoods at all, right? I still use Waze all the time. I'm terrible at directions. I couldn't talk about lists of sales and things like that, but there were things that I could just learn. So really where I created the most headway, and it was my strategy, is I wanted to make myself not a door opener, and I wanted to educate them. Because if you come off as sharp and you've added value, when they go to the next house, right? I always say it's like education travels, right? They're probably going to bump, if all you do is you talk about the house and how great it is or whatever, when they go to the next open house, there might be another friendly, well-dressed guy or gal, and you haven't separated yourself at all. So how I landed clients, and it was the only way I knew how to do it, is I could learn about the process. I could learn about the contract. Illinois is an attorney state. I'm telling you, those Wisconsin contracts, they're right to cure. If you can tell me what that is, then, oh my God, you've got me. I've got no idea how to explain that, right? So a buyer doesn't understand those things, how the inspection period works. It's some complicated stuff. So I found that how you land clients the most is teaching them something that they don't know about. And then actually you come off as a valuable resource. So I would typically ask them questions strategically that I know they don't know answers to, right? And some of the things that we would talk about, and most of these things should apply to both Chicago and Wisconsin. But the number one thing I always want to talk about is loans. And most people don't know much. But they've probably searched, they know the neighborhood potentially more than you do. They've been on Redfin and Zillow incessantly. So again, you're not trying to talk about properties, you want to talk about different things. So for example, right, I'm gonna ask them, for example, like, who are you pre-approved through, right? But I'm gonna dig way deeper. And I normally try to talk about the differences between like a pure mortgage broking company and like a big bank. And so, for example, and I think this would apply in Wisconsin, in Chicago, in general, we love it when buyers avoid big banks, when they're not working with a Wells or a Chase or something like that, a Citibank, because big banks come with more regulation, kind of like the government, right? So what my script would be to this person is like, hey, who are you pre-approved through? And they say, I'm pre-approved through Chase. You're like, that's great, right? You might want to look into Fairway Mortgage or some, a local Wisconsin lender, because here's why, right? If a listing agent has two identical offers, and one is through a big bank where things, if anything isn't to the T, it can get a little sticky to get that deal done, and another is with a Fairway or something like that, a listing agent for the most part would love to be working with the non-big bank, right? And so that's very true in Chicago. I don't know if it's the same way in Wisconsin, but I have a feeling that it is.
Yep. I would echo that, Kev. I think it's the same in Milwaukee.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I know would apply for sure, and this is a conversation that I would always have, is if you're in a price point where there's a potential for it to be a jumbo loan, right? So I know it's gone up, but a jumbo loan I think is about 524. So if you're in a property that's 650 or something like that, as I'm having this conversation, I would say, well, first of all, do you guys know if you're going to be a jumbo or not? They're going to have no idea. They don't know what a jumbo loan limit is, right? So then I'm going to dive into that conversation and let them know that that's what the limit is. And I'd say, here's the caveat, right? Well, in a typical scenario, we as listing agents would love to see you working with a pure mortgage broker. If you're getting a jumbo loan, you should definitely talk to a big bank. And here's why. For the most part, right, a big bank is going to win on a rate when it comes to a jumbo. They're going to beat a Fairway or a whatever a lot of times. And here's why. Because big banks, if you have a jumbo loan, they're working under the assumption that you've got a certain amount of wealth, whether it's true or not. But you're buying a house where the loan is big enough, it's in the jumbo category. So those banks want to do everything that they can to get you to use them for their loan, so they can have the asset management conversation with you over the next 6 to 12 months. They're going to call you and say, hey, glad we got your mortgage done through Chase. What are you doing with your assets? Because all those banks, right, they manage money and they can make percentages off of that. So that is why often rates with big banks beat in Chicago, like a guaranteed rate or a Fairway and things like that. So they can have that potential asset management follow-up conversation. Now, for the buyer, you could ignore that. You can have no intention to roll over your 401k there, but the benefit to you is you might get a better rate. So you don't have, that was a long-winded, conversation there. But if you interject pieces like that, buyers don't know that. They have no idea, right? And there's a lot of other things that they don't know. You can just say things like, hey, do you understand how the appraisal contingency works? Or do you understand how right to cure works, right? I mean, if you ask a buyer and you say, hey, do you understand how right to cure works? That's a really important thing. I don't know, you tell me, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to know what that means, right? And so now you can educate them on that. And normally, if you're having a good conversation here, I'll say things like, hey guys, I know you've got a busy day. I've got this all in a PDF, breaks down all, and you should, right? Have a buyer's guide, something. You know what? I know you're busy. Why don't I send this to you? What's the best email for you? And then they'll sign in, and then they will give you information, right? So that is the order that I do it. And when you do that, when you come across as an educator and not just talking about the house, a couple of things happen. When they go to the next open house and they meet the next friendly guy or girl, right? They remember you because you just taught them 3 or 4 things. But then when you ask them to sign in on their way out, they'll sign in at a way higher rate, because if they're serious, they do want to find a good agent to help them. And that's how I get sign-ins. So does anybody kind of have any questions or some ideas specific to Wisconsin? Some of the things that buyers don't understand that you think you could add value, as opposed to, kind of in addition to the list that I've got going on here, or anything that's worked for you? Em, do you have any thoughts?
I do have thoughts. I'm waiting for anybody else.
Catherine Cronin, you there? Where'd she go?
I don't want to take the stage.
No, we're going to make you.
Have the stage.
So give an example of how you could kind of add some value to buyers that things that they don't know. That's kind of in line with what I was saying here.
I think once you get through the accepted offer stage of the process, it becomes very daunting when you get to the inspection, because you're like, oh, what do I expect there? And so I like to even bring that up, if they ask questions about, some people ask me about the roof and the furnace and this and that. And I say, I don't have that information, but if you were to move forward on a house that you love, we would definitely contact the listing agent, but you're always protected by that inspection contingency. Has anyone ever explained that to you? And then you go through, the inspection process. And I think that gives people a level of confidence in the process as well, that maybe, they weren't aware of prior to, having this discussion with me. So I think inspection is, especially first-time home buyers, which is primarily who I've been working with, they want to make sure they're buying a good quality home for the price that it's listed at. Or if people ask me about, what do you think about the price? I'm not their agent, so I can't necessarily give them a direct answer, but I can say, the listing agent did their due diligence to price this home at market rate. If you did put in an offer and for some reason you paid too much, you'd be protected by your appraisal contingency. So I kind of always try to figure out what questions they're asking me and trying to then say, okay, what part of the process can I add value in explaining so that they feel a little bit more comfortable in the process. And just knowing that, yeah, you're putting an offer in on this house and you're spending a lot of money on it, but you're protected in 3 different ways per the contract that we put together to just give them a little bit more comfort in the process. And in me knowing how to explain each of the contingencies that we would put in place for them.
Yep. And I think, what people will want to work with as an agent for a couple different reasons. One is if you can give them value that they couldn't otherwise get, or you can get them access to properties that they don't have access to. And I think that would be, if I was doing open houses all the time in Wisconsin, with the inventory being so low, I would love to, I think a really good sales script is to get them to buy in that you've got some access to some pre-market stuff, right? It's a pretty easy script to say, hey guys, how you doing? Have you been out there? Has it been going well? You're frustrated? And they might be like, oh, every time we see something come on the market, it goes under contract before we can even get there. You're like, well, that's one of the best things about my office. We talk about what's coming soon. We do whatever that thing is on Tuesdays where you guys kind of, preview things and things like that. Yeah.
Right.
If you guys can get access, or at least talk about access to off-market stuff, I think in your market, that is quite valuable, right? In Chicago, it's a flip market, right? It's very, very much a buyer's market in Chicago. So it's going to sell before you can get there. I've got access to all this off-market inventory. That's not as good a value add in Chicago right now, because places aren't selling that fast and nobody's really worried about missing out. Buyers have a lot of leverage. Wisconsin, I would build scripts around access to, you could talk about your door knocking and your circle prospecting and those type of things, because I'm sure buyers are getting frustrated with losing out on properties.
We have one more question.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit related. It could definitely be a nugget to add value to an open house attendee, but that is related to escalation clauses. So a lot of buyers, most buyers, I would say, have no idea what an escalation clause is, but you could introduce that as a way to win in a multiple offer situation. So Kathy is actually asking if you can explain escalation clauses, and you can take it or I can take it.
Sure. So you could probably write them different ways in Wisconsin, but basically how we write escalation clauses here, and Emily, you can let me know if there's differences, is that an escalation clause gives your buyer, first of all, a lot of them don't know what it is. So like, ooh, that's pretty cool. That's smart, right? So an escalation clause could be something like this. We are going to offer $395,000 and we will beat the next proven and bona fide offer by $1,500 up to a maximum purchase price of $410,000. Right? And you explain that to the buyer and you say that way, what this prevents you is from missing out on a property by a minimal amount, especially when financing is so cheap. So if the best offer is $405,000 and they prove it to us, we get it for $406,500, right? And you can talk through that, but most buyers don't really understand what that means. So that is something that is a good tool for your buyers, first of all, but it's also something that a buyer might not know that existed, right? It helps them win the home, but it also caps them. And then you don't have to pick an imaginary number out there and say, I'm going to offer $420,000, right? You've actually put something behind it that hedges your bet. And do you kind of do them essentially the same way?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you can, simply when you're just starting out with a buyer who might not even have a clue what this is, I usually just say something even simpler, like we can offer $395,000 or $1,000 over the next best guy up to $410,000. So basically what I'm going to do is protect you guys from overpaying. And if somebody else wants to pay over $410,000, they're welcome to do it, but that's too high. And then if they lose it, they know they lost it for over $410,000. And if they win it, we only won it by $1,000 more than the next best guy, versus not knowing how much we beat the other offer. And that makes people nervous, right? Because they don't want to win by paying $15,000 more than the next best guy. They want to win by the minimal amount over the next best guy. So when you tell that to buyers, they're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And Catherine and I had a conversation about this briefly, and I know it's not as common in Milwaukee. It sounds like it's not. I do it 100% of the time in multiple offers.
I think it's common, but when I've been in my personal scenarios, and I'd be interested to hear what other agents have experienced, just in a competitive situation, agents have told me the cleaner the better. And to me, the cleaner the better means, you know, avoiding an escalation clause. So have people who have been in a buyer's market in Wisconsin versus a seller's market had any experience with the escalation, winning a deal on an escalation clause? Does anyone have any?
And I'll comment on the cleaner the better is for a lazy listing agent. Okay, Annie, go ahead.
I have been working with them and have won many deals actually this fall on them. But one of the things that I always make sure I do is I call the listing agent first. I have a lot of questions that I ask them, but then I ask them if they are okay with me submitting an escalation clause. Because I've had listing agents that are like, you know, I hate them. I don't want to use them. I quite frankly don't understand them. I've had. And so just make an offer. And so then I do. But the ones, for the most part, because everybody's been in this crazy market, they're like, yes, absolutely. It's totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And there's going to be listing agents that don't like it and things like that. But the point of this conversation is chances are buyers don't know how it works. So when you talk about it, even if you never use it, the point is that they look at you as an advocate. You're like, oh, I want that girl on my team. She's sharp, you know? Sure. And the point of this, really what you're trying to think about here is when you're in these open houses, you're trying to get these potential buyers to do one of two things. You're trying to set up an actual appointment after this, a buyer's consultation, or go look at 3 or 4 more homes next weekend. An appointment is number one that you're trying to set up, or to get them to raise their hand for one of your resources. If they raise your hand for one of your resources, you basically have them as a client, right? If you're talking about loans, if I'm talking about loans, I'm like, listen, this stuff's kind of confusing. I'm not a mortgage broker. You should talk to our guy, Mike at Fairway, and they say yes. I'm never losing that client ever. Okay, because Mike is going to, when they get done with that meeting, he's going to say something like, well, listen, you've got lots of lending options. If you do anything in this process, you should make sure you work with Emily because she's a rock star. So if they will raise their hand to one of your resources or set up a second face-to-face, that's your goal. That's what you're trying to do. Okay, or say, yeah, please send me this data. That's actually pretty helpful. That's the point of why you're doing this. Create a second face-to-face or get them to raise their hand. The other one that I think is good to know that most people don't do well or understand is they don't contingent offers, right? In the sense that people don't, when someone owns a house, right? I ask them all the time, you know, have you talked to a lender, and do you have the ability to buy without selling? And then they say things like, well, we have great credit, so it shouldn't be a problem. Right? And you're like, well, no, that actually has nothing to do with it, right? And then you talk to them about how the bank values. You've got a $400,000 mortgage here. You're going to buy a new place with a $500,000 mortgage. The bank is working off the assumption that you're never selling the first house. They're going to look at your debt to income ratio and find out, do you have the income to support $900,000 worth of mortgages, right? And that is how that works. And you get really smart people that have no idea that's how it works. Right? They say, well, no, I don't want to sell my house first. What if I can't find a place? Well, great. Yeah, that's not the reality. So that is something that that helps you get not the first time home buyer, but the second time home buyer that thinks they don't need an agent. Because like, I've been through this before. I've got this. And you say, listen, it was way easier the first time you did this when you were renting and you bought. It's about to get complicated. Right? And there's a whole strategy. And this is the number one thing you need to do, because I can't put a strategy together for you until we know that. Talk to my best lender, and then you can come up with a roadmap. So you're getting the point here, right? I did not have the ability to talk about neighborhoods or past sales or things like that. What we just talked through was a couple weeks of learning the contract, talking to lenders, talking to attorneys and things like that, or inspectors and or agents in your office. Focus on the things that the buyer doesn't know, and you can learn those things really fast. And the second you start talking about these types of things, no one has ever asked me how long I was in the business, ever, right? They never, ever ask, because I'd have been like, oh, 1 month, you know? So And so over the course of summer, I sold about, I think my third month in, I sold like 10 places in June or something like that. And the bulk of it was open house leads. So it can really, really work. But however, the point of, all that stuff is good, but just like anything else, the success is in the follow-up for the most part. So if you're in the kitchen, you're having a good conversation and you can set an appointment then, or you can get them to raise their hand for one of your resources, great. But statistically, that doesn't happen that often. So you have to get it through the follow-up. So what we typically would do, and we encourage the agents on our team to do, is the very day, maybe a couple hours later, right before you go to bed that night, text or call them. I typically text them and say, hey, thanks a ton for, come to the open house. Any follow-up questions? Maybe they say, actually, yeah, we haven't stopped thinking about it. We'd love to write an offer. That would be amazing. That's happened a few times, but probably not. They'd love to say, how'd you get my number? You're like, remember you called me and that. They're like, oh, you're pretty good. Thanks. Yeah, I got that, So you're going to text them. But if you hear nothing, next day, day two, say it was a Sunday open house, Monday, same thing. Reach out, anything, and try to add a little value with it. Did you guys see this one? This one just came on, or this one, did you see this over the weekend? Try to put a little bit to it. And then if you get to day three, what I do, and I assume it would work the same way in Wisconsin, is if I haven't connected on day one or day two, or feel like they're on the verge of taking me up on one of my resources or setting an appointment, I set up every single buyer on an MLS search. And that's essentially my drip. And I don't ask. So if they've signed in and I've got their email, I'll send them a generic email and say, hey, Mike and Michelle, I know we haven't quite connected yet. We keep missing each other. By missing each other, you're not picking up any of my calls. I thought it would be helpful if you saw everything similar to the house you walked in. So here's all the 3-bed, 2-bath, 300 to 400 in XYZ neighborhood or XYZ city. I don't want you to miss anything. Let me know if you want any tweaks or me to add any areas, and then just get it up and running. And then if you do about 10 of those, typically what happens is 3 people unsubscribe right away. That's fine. One person might actually circle back right away and say, oh, that's actually super helpful. Will you add this city or this neighborhood? And now that's like a win. I almost have them as a client. And then the other 5 or 6 are just running in perpetuity. And it'll be amazing how many times that if you do this for like every 10, somebody 2 months later is going to be like, oh my gosh, Kevin, I'm so sorry that we haven't responded to any of these. These are so helpful that you've been sending. They literally think every single morning I'm digging through the MLS and sending it to them, right? I'm like, no, I just set that up 2 months ago. I don't remember who you are. And then they're apologetic. And they're like, is there any chance we can see these 3? It happens all the time. So it's a drip that's automated. I don't need to think about it. So I'm going to try to land appointment. When I don't get it, fire them. Now they're going to go into our 33 touch as well, but I want to hit them more often. And so that's how we use the MLS search. So it works the same way in Wisconsin, right? Nothing different. It can all be automated. There's probably, I hope Charlie's not in it. I'm probably breaking some law by doing that, by not really asking, but I haven't gotten busted yet. So I think we're all okay. Forgiveness if needed.
Yeah. I don't think you're breaking any laws, but even if you were, our philosophy on our team is, of course, ask for forgiveness, not permission. So just blast it to them.
Yeah. And most people appreciate it, and you will get leads. So that's essentially the follow-up system. And then somewhere in there, whether I've connected with them or not, typically on Thursdays, we'll try to reach out and try to make yourself a commodity or something that shows that you're not just ready when they are. Say, hey guys, super busy weekend, but I want to block off some time for you on Saturday. Is there anything you want to look at? I've got a window from 1 to 3, and put it in front of them. And they're like, oh, wow, that Catherine must be pretty busy because she's only got 1 to 3 on Saturday. That doesn't work, but or whatever.
That's actually worked for me several times as a new agent. For really early on open house leads that I got, they wouldn't respond. But every Thursday I would say, hey, I have availability between this time. Let me know if you've seen anything that you like. And I think after the second week of third week of consistently doing that, she finally was like, okay, let's go. And now we're just waiting for the right property to pop up for her. So yeah.
Yeah. So really the point of open houses, the point of this class was, it is to me the most effective and cheapest way to grow your database, right? It's not expensive. There are expensive lead sources. I think, FSBOs, canceled, expired, those are all good lead generating things. I don't find that they convert at the rate that open houses do. And it's not my MO. I'd rather be face-to-face with people and things like that. So that was why I was passionate about these. But regardless of this, a lot of people might be new agents on this call, or people doing open houses, there's a lot of clutter out there, right? There's lots of different ways. There's Zillow leads, there's realtor.com, there's FSBOs, canceled, expired. Where do I spend it? There's farming, right? You want to try to get rid of a lot of that noise, and remember that you only have 2 jobs in real estate, right? I probably say this 5 times a week, it's to literally grow your MET database. Everybody says, what's the definition of a MET? Super simple. You've met them. That's it, right? What's a MET? You've met them. Doesn't mean it's your best friend, this, that. Don't prejudge your METs. That's another big thing that people do wrong. They're like, oh, that girl didn't like me, I'm not going to put her into my 33 touch, or I'm not going to reach out, or I'm going to bank on my best friend Jay because I know he's going to give me leads and things like that. It is amazing where you get leads from and where you do not, right? My best friend on the planet in Chicago since I've lived here has never, ever sent me a lead. And once a quarter, my quarterly touches, I just sent him a picture of a donut. And he's like, what is that? He's like, well, I'm like, that's 0. That's how many leads you've ever given me, ever. And that's my quarterly touch to him. And he's like, all right, eventually I will, right? So don't prejudge your METs, right? So grow your MET database and try to collect the 3 pieces of information, right? You want email, phone, and address, if you can. If you have one, addresses are trickier sometimes, right? I don't know what's better, a phone number or an email or whatever, but you need one of those for sure, obviously. Addresses are important, but get the first 2 for sure, right? Grow your MET database, and then consistently remind them in real estate. And what does that mean? Run a 33 touch. So your only 2 jobs: grow your database, remind them in your real estate, however you want to do it. And that's it, right? And that's how basically that's what they talk about, your data bank, right? That's where your money is going to come from, is from your MET database. So that is kind of the general chat here. Questions, comments, thoughts, anything else anybody wants to share about anything?
I'll make a little plug as you guys are unmuting and thinking of your questions, or you can type your questions in. But Kev kind of ended with this whole idea of grow your MET database, tell them you're in real estate. So next week at this same time, next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Wednesday, whatever day today is, a week from today, we are coming back at you guys with a more general presentation on lead generation, which is my favorite topic in the whole world, because open houses is one way to generate leads. And next week we'll talk about all different ways to generate leads and how to nurture and grow your database. So on that note, let's open it up to questions. So if you guys want to type in a question, or just unmute yourself and go.
I have a piece of advice, actually. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie from Chicago.
This is one of our amazing agents in Chicago. Hi, James.
Hello. So I've been doing open houses for a little over a year now, and something that I just started doing a couple weeks ago has gotten me 2 clients. So as I'm trying to add value, or I'll listen to what their specific situation is. So a lot of people come in and they're like, oh, we're browsing. We're not really looking to move until next year or something. I'll talk about another client I had, and I'll be like, oh, one of my other clients was in the same situation. Funny enough, I actually met them at an open house, and then I'll continue talking about it. And I think a lot of people think that we're trying to just sell the property. They don't realize that we're trying to land them as a client. So I try and slip that into every person I'm talking to, oh, your situation reminded me of another one where I met someone in an open house. So they know that oh, I can actually maybe use this realtor. Oh, wow, this person can actually help me even though I didn't know her before, or something like that. So that's something I've been slipping in lately, and it's been working.
So Jamie, on that exact same point, right? I will literally try to ask them, if I remember every time, I'll say, hey, where are you guys in the process of interviewing a buyer's agent?
Mm-hmm.
And they look at you with a blank face and I didn't know we were supposed to interview a buyer's agent. And they're like, well, what does that look like? I'm like, well, we're doing it right now.
Yeah.
You know? And they're like, oh, okay. Like, they don't know, like, they don't.
Yeah, they have no idea. They think we're just trying to like, we're the listing agents and we're just trying to like sell the property.
Yeah.
Whereas like we've learned here today, the whole point of the open houses is just to like get new leads.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, James. Pretty bold of you to wear a Cubs hat on a Milwaukee webinar.
Sorry. I own.
All right. What else?
Do you vet out any of these emails or text messages, these METs that you get before you add them to a 33 touch, or is it just automatic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much just putting it in.
Okay.
Because, yeah. We will clean up our database on like a 6-month yearly basis kind of thing, because Molly Mudd, our amazing admin that's on the call down here, our director of ops, she'll, prints out kind of our, so 29 of the 33 steps are automated. 4 of the steps fall on the agent where we have to call them quarterly, and we'll get a printout every month. And that is where you might get in, you're like, I think this was an open house lead from 3 years ago. I don't even really know who this person is. Like you might clean it up, but if I'm not spending money mailing anything to them, I don't really care. Just keep them in there. What's the worst that can happen?
Carol, we'll talk about that more next Wednesday, okay? That's a really good question, but we're going to do a whole conversation about database.
Perfect.
What else, guys? We have just a couple minutes. It's 11:03, so if you need to sign off, sign off. But Kevin, I can stick around for just a few more minutes for any other questions.
I have just a tidbit of information. It's not really a question, but an agent once told me, if you're at an open house and someone doesn't give you all their information on the sign-in sheet, you should fill in, after they leave, you should fill in fake information, because people just like psychologically want to fill in something as well as the person above them. So if all the information's there, like they're more likely to fill in everything.
Yeah, I sign in a dummy email, dummy sign in on every one.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So yeah, so I'll normally wait till like, if it starts at 11, I'll do it by like 11:10, because if I've got a dummy information signed in at like 11:01, they're like, well, we were the first one here, right? So give it a window. But yeah, I put my buddy Mike Affel, maffey@gmail.com, and I fill out his number every single time. Also, every one of our sign-in sheets, we probably sounded more. I never put, do you have an agent? I don't have that on there. Like, why give them a chance to tell me that they do?
Well, and I'll take that a step further. If they have an agent, that's fine. But we can assume that whatever other agent that they might be working with, we are infinitely better. So it doesn't matter. Like, if they have an agent, great, I'm better. That's like the assumption, right? Like, we have to go with that energy and that mindset. Because if we just are like, oh, they have an agent, like I'll never win, then you won't ever win. But if you just assume that they have an agent, but I'm a better agent, then you could win the business.
On that note, at one of our open houses for a listing that we had, a client came in, I was hosting the open house. They said, oh, I have an agent. I said, okay, great, whatever. Still got all their sign-in information, and we did a price drop really quick. And regardless of if they have an agent or not, I was there at the open house keeping track of who's coming in. And so I sent them a text, say, hey, you walked through this address or this open house. Just want to let you know we dropped the price. If you're interested, give me a call or let your agent know. And they called me that week and complaining about their agent and wanting to move forward with me. So that's another good thing. Just because they say they have an agent doesn't mean, then you have to approach, do you have a buyer's agency, whatever, you have to have that conversation, but don't just say, okay, I'm not worthy of, or I'm not going to be of use to this person, because you never know down the line, really how they're being treated by their agent. And, some agents just aren't as good as all you KW agents, right?
That's
yeah,
right.
and I mean, and I think obviously we're going to respect anything that's signed. That's
For
not
sure.
Emily's point is like, talk and act assumptively, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they are going to work with you, and you kind of tell them, hey guys, this is what you need to do. Even if you don't work with me, you got to talk to my best lender at Fairway. He's amazing. This is an important deal for you guys. I want to get you guys connected. You guys should do this, and assume and talk in ways. We do buy some command leads and some Zillow leads, and when you meet them for the first time, you don't need to be very timid about it. You're like, this is what we want to do. This was great, but I got to get you set up on a search some off market stuff, get some things up and going. Let's get this narrowed down. This is what you need. And kind of assume that they're already working with you and kind of own the conversation, and you'll win a lot. If you were like, well, if whenever you think maybe I'm really good, no, just kind of own it. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. Read personalities. People have different personalities, of course. But assume that you are that you're a really good resource for them. And it's almost your obligation for their benefit to get them to work with you, because otherwise the experience is not going to be as good. And if you
carry that into your follow-up too, because from my own personal home buying experience, I never researched agents. I just, picked the first one that I met, and how many people are like that too. So if you just own that you're their agent after you first met them, then just proceed with that, and they'll start to believe it too, because they know no different.
And the other thing is, if you do have some concerns about being a little bit newer, or you're afraid that they're going to ask that, or you want to add value, or some of the ways that I talked about adding value might not be how you like to do it, have some market stats. If you rock up and you're like, here's everything that came on the market, since September 1st, up to 35 homes, 30 of the 35 have sold. Here's the graph. Average market time is 14 days. If you have some data, right, when you show that, no, agents don't really have that. So print out some stuff at your open houses and find a way to talk about that. That will also set you up as an expert, and avoid any other conversations of how long you've been in business or anything like that. All right, we got time for one last question. Anybody got anything they want to share?
Yeah, what else you guys got?
Everybody's got it mastered? We doing 5 open houses this weekend?
Yeah, everybody have an open house scheduled this weekend? Let's make that everybody's action item.
By the way, here's one other thing. Even if you are not able to get an open house scheduled because of inventory, or you don't have a lot of listings, if an agent came to me and said, hey, Kevin, I saw you're doing an open house at X, Y, and Z. Do you mind if I do some door knocking and hang some things around your open house? Of course, I'm going to say yes. You're going to, if you knock on some doors or you hang some stuff branded to you, my seller's going to be happy, but I'm always going to say yes. Do whatever you want. Sure. Post our open house, post it on your social media. It doesn't have to be your open house. Just ask the agent. And then that lets us circle back to our seller and say, this is what we're doing.
Also, as a newer agent too, if you're nervous, like, how do I approach an open house? What do I say? What do I do? Something I did when I first started was just go to open houses as I'm the buyer. So I understand, how different brokerages handle open houses, different agents handle open houses. And then I can say, okay, I liked that approach, or I didn't like that approach, give you ideas on what you would do differently, was really helpful. Or even, agents, maybe they say, hey, they have a new listing, and you see it on Charlie's team meeting, new listings upcoming, but they want to host that open house. Say, hey, can I shadow, see how you handle it? Because, sometimes you just have no idea how to approach an open house. So it's helpful to just kind of be a fly on the wall, so to speak.
I actually did that last weekend. And I bumped into, just word to the wise, look at the agent who's hosting the open house before you walk in. Because I met another killer agent who's actually the definition of the. And she ended up being really cool about it, and actually might give me an open house to do in the future. But it was that was my takeaway, was check who the agent is before you walk in.
I always say you're looking at it for a buyer you might have too. Like, I've had agents come through open houses that I host that are like, oh, I'm just looking for a buyer. You don't have to blow your cover too much. But
I don't think you have to, feel bad about, hey, I'm previewing it. I'm trying to look at it. I actually think as a newer agent, this is what I used to do is, and Milwaukee's different, but say, okay, cool. I'm gonna go to 5 different open houses this weekend, and in 5 different neighborhoods or cities, to see what 350 grand buys me, right? This is what buys me there. This is what buys me there. That is a very, you can do a lot of that online, but you should, if you are previewing things and you're trying to learn the market, be strategic about it. And you can do whatever, but it's like, walk into $1 million house and then a $200,000 condo and then a 500, so it's kind of like come up with some strategy behind it. Today, I'm going to look at this neighborhood at this price point, or these 3 different neighborhoods at that price point. So you can learn the market. And then of course, that's ways to circle back to your clients. You can any of these hypothetical clients, hey guys, I know you were busy this weekend, but I wanted to go into these 3 open houses to see if they'd be good for you. I don't know. I really like this one. You're just trying to kind of find a way to add value as well.
Awesome.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining in. You guys are awesome. However many people we had, it was a bunch. Thanks for interacting and jumping in. And like Emily said, what are we next Wednesday, Em?
Yeah, next Wednesday. And I'll wrap up here with a quick open house story that I think is relevant. You guys might not care. I don't even know, Kevin, if you know this story. I think you do. But the reason that Phair Hinton Chicago, Milwaukee exists is because I did exactly what Reagan was saying. A year ago, I just went to open houses just to kind of see how people were doing them and just to be a fly on the wall and meet people. And I met Lauren Foy of Falkgrove and Gallagher. I had the nicest conversation. She was lovely and did an amazing job. And then my wheels started turning like, oh boy, wouldn't it be fun to expand our team to the Milwaukee market? I then took that to Kevin, and then Phair Hinton Chicago became Phair Hinton Chicago Milwaukee. But it was all from an open house where I got connected to KW Milwaukee North Shore and realized that that was the place that I wanted our business to go. So all good things happen at open houses, guys. So we will post this. I know somebody has asked for the PowerPoint. We'll share that. I'll put that on the Facebook page. And then we will see you guys next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. And we'll do more of a deep dive into lead generation in general. Yeah? Everybody good?
All right, everybody.
Cool. All right, guys.
Sell some stuff.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye.